Hello, and welcome to today's recorded learning session, Virtual Collaboration for Leaders at NAVFAC. Today's narrators will be Dr. Ramona Sharp and myself, Dr. Jeffrey Weaver. Let me just take a moment to acknowledge the expectations of the term and use of leader throughout this learning session. The session was designed for leaders at every level and capacity, meaning that you don't have to be supervisory in nature to be considered a leader. Let's look at the agenda for today. There are three major areas: the opening, leading virtual collaborations, and closing. During the opening, we'll discuss some basic functionality of MS Teams. We'll also cover the objectives for virtual collaboration for this learning session. In the leading virtual collaborations, we're going to discuss some pros and cons, keys for leader success, and meeting do's and don'ts. And in the closing, we're going to ensure that you have and understand some key takeaways, and we're also going to explain how the 70-20-10 adult learning model relates to virtual collaboration. One point that I need to make at this point is the following statement. The United States government does not endorse any links provided, but recognize that they may be of use. This is in regards to the announcement that we sent out prior to this session with the links to articles, videos, and podcasts. Now let's talk about some MS Teams functionality. Before we go any further, let me bring to your attention the icon in the upper left-hand corner. That pencil and paper indicate that there is a corresponding workbook page to this PowerPoint slide. Here is the basic Microsoft Teams toolbar that most people see. There's a variety of functions on here, but we're only going to talk about a few. One that I want to ensure that everybody understands is the camera. What you see is that icon with the camera with a slash through it. That means that your camera is turned off. You have the ability within MS Teams to either turn your camera on or turn it off. The next icon is the microphone. You see there's no slash, so that means your microphone is active. If you'd like to turn your microphone off, and in most cases you'll come into the room and your microphone will automatically be turned off. So you have the ability of toggling on or toggling off your microphone as needed. The next icon that we were going to talk about are the three little dots, but we're going to pause on that and come back to it in just 1 second. The next icon is the hand. The hand is an indicator that you would like to speak. So if your microphone is muted, you click on this hand icon and it will give you the opportunity to raise your hand as if you're sitting in a classroom. That will then alert the presenters that you have a question or would like to make a comment. They will then call on you, ask you to turn your microphone on or unmute you themselves, and then you can ask your question or make your comment. The next icon is the chat button, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second after we talk about the three dots. The final icon that I want to bring to your attention are the two little people icon. That will tell you and give you a list of all the participants that are a part of this class. So let's go back and talk about the three dots. When you click on that three dot icon, you have an opportunity for another pop-up menu. In that pop-up menu, it gives you a variety of features that you can toggle on or toggle off. As you can see, we've indicated one that might be of interest to you, and that's the ability to turn on or turn off live captions. And if you look at the red arrow, you'll see that the live captions, when turned on, will display the speech across the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So whatever is being stated in the session will appear on your screen. Then going into the next icon, which is the chat that we briefly talked about, when you click on that chat icon, you'll see on your right-hand screen a meeting chat box that pops up, and that will stay until you turn it off. That will allow you to communicate via text with all of the participants in that session. Just one point of reference to make sure that everybody is clear. Unlike other online tools, there are no private communications in your chat window for MS Teams. So be mindful of when you're saying something, everybody will have the opportunity to see what you've stated. Now, let's talk with Dr. Sharp as she covers the objectives for this learning session.
To provide leaders who have unique responsibilities with information and recommendations on how to create and foster a productive virtual work environment. To do this successfully will require trust and effective leader communication across NAVFAC. This is our objective for today. In addition, there are 3 items participants will be able to do by the end of our session today. First, identify best practices for leading virtual collaboration. Second, understand the roles and responsibilities of leaders and the available virtual environment tools. And third, build skills for effective virtual collaboration following the 70-20-10 learning model. Why is today's objective so important? So that you can help the team thrive in a virtual environment and so that you can lead the team to success through collaboration.
Thank you, Ramona. In your mind's eye, imagine yourself in your first leadership role. Now picture the year 2020. What did you imagine you would be leading? Naval shore readiness efforts? Distribution of maritime operations? Or strengthening the SysCom team, all while working from home? Did you know that video calls would become the primary way of seeing a coworker or leading the team? Could you imagine telling the team that they couldn't travel, or limiting personal contact with family, and wearing a face mask just to talk to your neighbors? Probably not. But that is the world we're living in and challenges we are leading teams to overcome. As leaders, we are being asked and asking our teams to step up our game by working together virtually in new and demanding ways. This requires a great deal of resilience and collaboration. We must embrace new methods of talking with each other, sharing documents or ideas, giving feedback, reaching our goals, all in order to accomplish our mission and be the trusted facilities and expeditionary experts that enable the fleet and Marine Corps lethality. To meet organizational performance expectations, we need to lead collaborations in new and innovative ways. A perfect example is the virtual change of command that was conducted by NAVFAC Southeast on July 9th, onboard Naval Air Station Jacksonville, where Captain Koudros relieved Captain Monreal as the commanding officer, NAVFAC Southeast, and the Navy's Southeast Regional Engineer. With Rear Admiral Vanderlei, Commander NAVFAC Atlantic, presiding over the ceremony, he summed it up perfectly as he stated, "The fact that we are conducting this change of command in this manner is a testament of the ingenuity and flexibility of your team. We must continue to lead the delivery of naval power around the world with new rules of engagement. Although this requires being present and leading by example in challenging new environments, we will persevere. By channeling creativity, developing trust, and improving our communication and collaboration skills, we will achieve that mission." The icon that you see on the screen now is a video that we asked you to review prior to this learning session. It's a virtual conference call. If you didn't have the opportunity to review it, that's okay. We do ask that you go back and review it later because there are some very interesting points that will make you laugh, as we do some of those things still today. But there are a few takeaways that the author wanted you to understand moving forward, and there's 3 of them. The first one, virtual collaboration is hard, and technology is often against us. However, with practice and understanding, we can lessen the impacts. 2, a leader must be patient. When dealing with new environments, we have to take a step back, collect ourselves as leaders, and we must realize that everybody moves at different paces, so we've got to practice that patience. 3, a leader needs to consider all possible outcomes and modes of engagement to reach the team, because there will be hurdles to every technology avenue that's taken. I hope you have an opportunity again to review the video if you haven't, and if you have, let us know how you liked it. Now we're going to talk with Ramona, and she's going to discuss the art of collaboration.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So, what is leading collaboration? How do we define it? Simply put, it is the action of guiding others to accomplish a goal, project, or mission, with 2 caveats. First, leading the team, which means leading those who have been designated as being part of your team, and collaborating with other leaders, which simply means collaborating with your colleagues, your peers. Now that we understand what collaboration is, we are going to cover the differences between a physical working space and a virtual working space when leading collaboration. We are currently in the workbook on page 4. So what are physical versus virtual working spaces? Well, a physical working space is a traditional work environment. You know, what we were all used to prior to the pandemic. That's when you drove into the job and you had a designated office or cubicle space. That's what we mean when we say a physical working space. Now, a virtual working space is when you work online or remotely. It's the world we work in on MS Teams. And if you take a look at the diagram, the circle to the right gives description of virtual working spaces, and the circle to the left gives descriptions of physical working spaces. So let's take a moment and discuss some of the similarities and differences of virtual and physical working spaces. So in a physical working space, you have a chance of having spontaneous social or work interactions. What does this mean? That means if you're in a physical workspace, you may get up to grab a cup of coffee or grab a soda out of the vending machine, and there's a chance that you could bump into a colleague and have an interaction that wasn't planned. That doesn't happen when you are working in a virtual working space. Those interactions are technology driven. Any kind of communication is technology driven, and any kind of meeting has to be purposeful. So what exactly does that mean? That means if you want to talk to a colleague or have an interaction with a colleague, first of all, it has to be deliberate. You have to plan it. You have to get on their calendar. And it's going to be technology driven, meaning that you'll have to set up some kind of virtual meeting. Now, if you look at the area that overlaps between the two circles, the middle of the diagram, you'll see areas that applies to both physical and virtual working spaces. So a great example of that would be project management. So whether you're working in a physical working space or a virtual one, you're going to need great project management skills. So how does this affect collaboration? Well, collaboration may be more difficult to achieve in a virtual environment, but trust me, it is possible. Virtual teams can often outperform traditional ones. In an extensive study of 80 software development teams with programmers from the United States, South America, Europe, and Asia, this was proven. And the way this was proven is that oftentimes the virtual teams were able to lead by increased efficiency and better results. It was amazing. Harvard Business Review reported that not only were some of these teams able to succeed, but they were able to maximize the potential benefits while minimizing the disadvantages. So something to keep in mind, it is possible, but it may require a little bit more work. Transitioning to virtual work comes with many challenges and opportunities. Let's review pros and cons from a leader's point of view. We are now in the workbook on page 5. So I'm not going to read every item in the list to you. However, I do want to go through a few examples. So if we look in the pros column, an example of a pro would be flexibility and improved work-life balance. So what exactly does that mean? Well, that means you may have more flexibility in how you can lay out your day or arrange your day. And this may provide you some improved work-life balance. So, for example, you may be able to have an early morning doctor's appointment and come back home and not have to take time off because you don't have to drive into the office. And you're able to get back home, by your normal start of the day. Or maybe you're juggling parenting or schooling for your children. And because you're working from home, you have a little more flexibility in getting them started on their virtual day. Just some examples for you. So let's look at cons. And so an example of a con is reduced nonverbal communication. So what exactly does that mean? Well, that refers to that when you're working virtually, you're not going to be able to actually see body language. Now, you may be able to see a little bit of, facial expressions, but there's a lot of non-verbal communication that you're going to miss out on. You're not going to be able to read your colleagues as well as if you were sitting across from them or, standing next to them and able to, again, read those nonverbal cues. But I do want to point out that there are some items that can be both a pro and a con. So if you look at the first line, you'll see technology is listed as both. And this is a perfect example. So a pro of technology is that right now we're all able to work from home and still be productive and get work done. Now, a con of technology is that if there's any kind of glitch, if your Wi-Fi goes down or you have a bad connection, that it can definitely be a con to being effective that day. Another example of an item that can be both a pro and a con is if you look at the last line of each list, you'll see under pros, reduction in stress level, and you'll see under cons an increase in stress level. Now, you may ask, what does that mean? But here's an example. Your stress level may be reduced because now you no longer have to travel into the office. That would definitely be a pro. But an example of a con would be, okay, you don't have to travel, but you're staring at your monitor for hours at a time, and now you're starting to get monitor fatigue. That is an example of how there could be a con of an increase in stress level. So while many of these pros and cons are present in any work situation, whether they are virtual or not, these particular items call for extra sensitivity in a virtual work environment. Now Jeffrey will get us started for our discussion on some best practices for leader success.
Thank you, Ramona, for sharing the art of collaboration. Notice the icon in the upper left-hand corner. This is the first instance of an activity. Please turn to page 6 of your workbook and you'll find space to write down your thoughts. Let's take a moment and reflect. As a leader in a virtual environment, you face the challenge of managing, supporting, and inspiring employees who are not in the same location as you. To set an intention for this learning session and to connect it to the mission, I want you to reflect on the following questions. How do you, as a leader, support the continued motivation of your team? How would you be able to support and guide the team if you were better at fostering collaboration? You'll have time to reflect on this question. Please pause the playback and continue when you're ready. To continue our thinking about leading virtual collaboration, let's use a poll that was used in our previous session. I will share the most popular response to this poll once you had the opportunity to respond in your workbooks. Question: what is a key difference between you leading a virtual team and you being a member of a virtual team? Is it A, absolutely nothing, B, my focus shifts from what's good for me to what's good for the team? C, my objective becomes to ensuring the team has what it needs to be successful? Or D, my communication style must change? Please pause the playback and you can resume when you're ready. Now that you've had the opportunity to think about the question and your response, let's see how your response compares to the most popular answer for the question. The most popular response is, if your answer was B, that is correct. And here are a few reasons why. 1, you must think about the overall success of the group over the individual. 2, focus should be on the team success as there is no I in team. And finally, when you lead, you have to put yourself in the background and ensure the team members are set up for success. As we transition into a discussion away from the poll and our response, let's think about what leaders before us had to do or created as best practices for us to follow. And a couple questions come to mind as we think about those best practices. Where do they come from? Who created them? Well, the answer is leaders just like you. So we ask that you take a few minutes and complete the statement, as a leader, I. What are your best practices as a leader in a virtual environment? Please pause the playback and resume when you are ready. Now that you've had the opportunity to write down your thoughts and best practices, let's discuss a few ideas around the list that you see here on the screen. These are based in research of successful leaders. I'll just mention a few. As a leader, you are expected to always lead with the truth. Tell the team what is needed up front. Check in on the mental well-being of your team and show concern. Be sure to provide clear, attainable standards and expectations for the team or project. And finally, you should recognize the contributions of your team members and publicly acknowledge their efforts. As we move forward, Ramona will lead us through the discussion on keys for leader success.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Let's discuss the keys for leader success in virtual environments. We are in the workbook on page 8. Communication and trust are vital for leader success in a virtual environment. By the way, you can find the definitions for each of those in your workbook. Let's spend a few moments discussing each. On our slide, we see that communication needs to be effective, honest, frequent, descriptive, and transparent. So for example, when we say frequent, what do we mean by that? Well, we mean that communication needs to happen regularly. We mean that it needs to be ongoing for it to really help your team. Let's move on to trust. Trust needs to be mutual, inclusive, and safe. And it needs to model integrity. So, for example, what does it mean for trust to be mutual? All that means is that it needs to go both ways. That you need to trust your team and your team needs to trust you. Creating a nurturing environment of mutual trust across distance and empowering employees via open and honest lines of communication will help you to successfully lead your team. While we have just reviewed keys for leader success, here are 5 habits for leaders that yield big results for your team's overall success. You can remember them with the acronym SHARE. SHARE stands for S, speak. Speak with the team and provide reports, progress, or updates regularly. This ties back to making sure that communication is ongoing. H, hold. Hold trust in the team. Again, this links back to the importance of trust. A, appreciate. Appreciate the team's work. R, respect. Respect working hours. And E, examine. Examine emails and messages carefully. And this just links to our previous conversation of how important communication is, especially when you don't have any physical or nonverbal cues to rely on. You must pay attention to things like written communication and emails even more carefully. We are currently on page 9 in your workbook. As we discussed in previous slides, being the leader carries a good deal of effort and additional requirements. As leaders of virtual teams, effective and collaborative meetings are vital for driving NAVFAC's mission forward. To continue our thinking about meeting do's and don'ts, let's use a poll that was used previously. I will share the results of that live poll after I give you some time to consider your response and write in your workbook. So your poll question is, what is your number one challenge when leading a team meeting remotely? Your answer options are A, attendees who are multitasking and or not paying attention. B, attendees who are unprepared. C, attendees who dominate discussions and do not allow other teammates to participate. D, attendees who do not value the team's time. They show this as being a no-show or chronically late. Or E, all of the above. So now please pause the playback and continue when you are ready. Now that you've had the opportunity to think about the question and your response, let's see how your response compares to that of the live session that was previously conducted. The most popular response was B, attendees who are unprepared. And here are a few reasons that were given to support that response. First, you must send the agenda and any pre-reads in sufficient time for attendees to be prepared for the meeting in advance. Second, you may need to send reminder communications to attendees concerning pre-work. And finally, third, you may need to reserve some time before the meeting for discussion if there are attendees who need clarity on the pre-work and have questions. Now let's discuss what we can do as leaders to avoid some of these challenges. This section will draw on participant experience and can be found in the workbook on pages 9 through 11. We all spend a great deal of time on MS Teams, the phone, and other platforms than we used to, and this is where most of the work regarding collaboration comes in. Our virtual working environment requires extra communication and intentional effort on every individual's part. This is most evident during meetings. We, as leaders, can take action before, during, and after meetings to lead more productive conversations and increase collaboration. Share your ideas in the workbook about best practices for personal conduct before meetings. We will give you some time to think about your answer and write it down. Then, we will discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. You can take notes and afterwards visit the list in your workbook. So please take a moment and think about what can leaders do before virtual meetings to increase collaboration. At this point, please pause the playback and continue when you are ready. Now that you've had some time to think about your answer and write it down, let's discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. Well, first, communicate expectations for the meeting. These could be ground rules or expected outcomes of the discussion. Another answer was, share the agenda in advance with the team to give members time to prepare comments. And this last one was really key. Be sensitive to time zone differences, calendar constraints, technology interruptions, family interruptions, and more. What can leaders do during virtual meetings to increase collaboration? Now, you can share your ideas in the workbook about best practices for personal conduct during meetings. We will give you some time to think about your answer and write it down. Then, we will discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. You can take notes and afterwards visit the list in your workbook. At this point, please pause the playback and continue when you are ready. Now that you've had some time to think about your answer and write it down, let's discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. First, be aware of any nonverbal communication happening on screen or over the phone. Next, be sure to model collaborative behavior by checking in on each person participating throughout the meeting. Another great answer was reiterate key points being stated throughout the meeting. And lastly, communicate next steps. What can leaders do after virtual meetings to increase collaboration? Now, please share your ideas in the workbook about best practices for personal conduct after meetings, and we will discuss them. We'll give you some time to think about your answer and write it down. Then, we will discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. Now, please pause the playback and continue when you are ready. Now that you've had some time to think about your answer and write it down, let's discuss some of the answers that were given in the live session. Our first answer was, carry out any commitments you make and communicate the results. Our next response was, seek feedback on how the meeting went from the team. That's a good one. And lastly, make notes for how to improve future meetings. Let's take a few minutes to practice what we just learned about meetings. By the way, we are on page 12 in your workbook. You will have some time to read the case study and write down your thoughts in your workbook based on the questions. In our case study, Chris leads a design project with 12 engineers who are in multiple locations for a new high-tech building in San Diego, California. He's a bit frustrated by the team's mediocre enthusiasm and resistance to change. As a retired naval officer, Chris prefers morning meetings. He gathers and distributes meeting materials early, identifies the topics for discussion, and even crafts the detailed agenda, which is always distributed before the meeting, even if only by an hour. Chris knows what he and the team should do and believes he leads well. A team manager recently shared that Chris does not deal well with change himself. At this time, please pause the playback and you can resume when you are ready. Now that you've had a few moments to work on the case study, let's discuss some of the more popular responses in our previous session. So when we look at what we would recommend for Chris to do before the meeting, the more popular responses focused on agendas. And that included creating an agenda in advance, getting input from the team into that agenda, as well as sending out the agenda before the meeting. Let's move on to some of the more popular responses for during the meeting. And the most popular really focused on being mentally and physically present. And if you're doing that, you're also able to look for any nonverbal cues that might help you to be better and help your team along. And then lastly, recommendations for what to do after the meeting really focus on feedback. And feedback is a gift. So whenever you can get feedback, please try to get it. It will only help you to improve. So now I will pass you back to Jeffrey to discuss the 70-20-10 adult learning model and how it can help you.
Thank you, Ramona. Now you're probably asking yourself, how does the 70-20-10 model fit into virtual collaboration? I'm happy that you're asking that question. Let's discuss how it can be linked together. Just as a recap to ensure that we all understand and know the model, let me explain the parts of the model first. So the picture that you see in front of us, there are three parts: 10%, 20%, and 70%. 10% being formal, via classroom, workshops, or even recorded learning sessions such as this. You actually take that, you're registered for it, and you complete it. 20% or social, that can be done via mentoring, coaching, or peer-to-peer ideas. That's something that you can do and you learn from that 10% and then you share that with others, whether they be members of your team or members of your command. And then 70%, experiential, on-the-job training. That can be direct assignments, stretch assignments, or it can even be details and rotations. But what you're doing is you're actually putting your hands on, or you're doing the tasks of whatever it is that you're trying to learn, so that you have that first-hand experience. Now that we discussed the actual model, let me show it how it can be linked to virtual collaboration. 10% or formal, attending a learning session. As I said before, just as this very course itself, even recorded sessions can be seen as formal. 20% or social. For those that were unable to attend the session, you can create group meetings, maybe a brown bag lunch, and share the aspects of the learning session with others that were unable to attend, and they can be members of your team or members of your command. Another way you can use social would be to review the recorded learning session as a small group. Then you can pause the playback and have short group discussions around the elements of the session. And then finally, 70% or experiential, you can invite employees that you're mentoring or if they're shadowing you as a leader to a variety of virtual meetings in an observation mode only, to learn how to lead virtual meetings and deal with the challenges of those interactions firsthand, as you resolve the challenges during the meetings directly. Another way that you could use experiential would be to take this recorded learning session together with a mentee, and you can oversee or guide them creating an actual virtual meeting or workshop for the team. We wanted to take a moment and give you a tool. This tool can be found on pages 14 and 15 in your workbook. I know it's a bit wordy, but we wanted to ensure that you could share it with others in greater detail for those that were unable to attend the learning session, with clear examples that can be accomplished using the 70-20-10 model. Within each column, you will find 5 examples of activities that can be accomplished in each category, 70, 20, or 10. You will see that in the 10 column, there are links to videos and articles to support your learning as well as the learning of others. As a reminder, the United States government does not endorse any links provided, but recognizes that they may be of use. At this time, we ask that you take a few seconds to write your ideas and thoughts that will help you use this page to support your workforce development, but also the workforce development of others. Please pause the playback and you can resume when you are ready. The Career Compass Resource Center, or the CCRC. We hope that many of you have taken the opportunity to explore the various pages and information located on the CCRC. If you haven't, please find the link at the bottom of the page and check it out. There you will find a variety of resources, tools, and information to support your workforce development here at NAVFAC. In fact, if you've registered for this course through the Total Force Development page, the link used for this recorded session is located on the CCRC. We hope that you use and visit the CCRC pages frequently and explore the contents shared around the 20 non-technical competencies specifically developed for NAVFAC communities. On page 16 in your workbook, you will find our final reflection. And I leave you with these two questions, and you can share your responses with your mentor, colleagues, coworkers, or supervisor as you would like. Question 1. What is the number one takeaway you learned today? Question 2. What tips will translate and work well for you and your colleagues today, and why? Please pause the playback and you can resume when you are ready. To receive credit for participating in this course, please find the instructions on this page. You need to submit a self-certification email to the NAVFAC admin's email that you see addressed. You need to provide the two elements, the course name and the course completion code, in order to ensure that you properly receive credit in NFACs for your completion of this course. Thank you for viewing this recorded version of Virtual Collaboration for Leaders. If you have any questions, please contact Headquarters BD17 at NAVFAC HQ Total Force Development at Navy.mil, and someone within the BD17 community will contact you to resolve your questions.